afternoon. I don't know, it's almost evening. Say that by the light in the room, but it's 6 p.m. here in Berlin, Germany. So it's evening, technically. Okay, let me just turn off the phone. I don't vibrate. Excellent. So welcome to my stream, where today I will be having a nice look at AWS AppConfig. So it's the end of the week, Thursday, right? I'm gonna have a nice relaxing stream where I'm gonna have a look at AWS AppConfig, a wonderful service that well, helps you deploy quickly and safely application configurations. So yeah, I think I will be playing around with that. I have some things ready, so hopefully this all goes as smooth as I want it to go. Excellent. So let me switch to this. Yes, excellent. Cool. So what is AppConfig? So I would love to ask you all on stage, on stream, on whoever's listening, how do you manage application configurations? How do you do feature toggle? How do you, well, a lot of people do it in a very, well, it's weird to say traditional way, but it is a traditional way. So they bake those configurations into either their code. So when they make a change, they would make a change through Git, and they would update the entire application, bake a full-on deployment, which is okay, but it can be done better because doing a full-blown deployment like that can be taxing. Especially if you want to make a quick feature toggle. It's not as fast. It takes a while. No matter how fast your deployments are, just to have a feature toggle or just a thing that changes one setting in your end application, it will take a bit longer time. There's other people who do this with, so they put their configurations in a remote location, and then they just change that thing on a remote location and just hope, which is fine, right? It's a faster option, but you may get inconsistencies that in the middle of something happening, something might change, right? Or rolling back, especially if you have complex changes, would require, well, managing that rollback or doing it in a more intelligent way. Or if you want to make that change, not do everything at once, well, then it's difficult to handle. So AppConfig is basically a service that enables you to do that. It enables you to quickly deploy application configurations, right? So it has controlled deployments, so you can decide how much of what percentage of your application or whatnot you wish to deploy your changes to. It can do validations of your configurations. It can do even more validations with Lambda function. It can also roll back, so it can, in case there's something bad going on, if there's an issue with your, let's say, your configuration breaks your application. So what AppConfig can actually do, AppConfig can monitor like an alarm on CloudWatch, and then based off an alarm being triggered, it will actually roll back your change. Good afternoon, Graham. Good afternoon. How are you? Hope you are all good. Excellent. So, I want to make sure that catch any YouTube chats. For some reason the YouTube chat doesn't show up on this one. This should be fine. I am well, Graham. I'm pretty good. Next week, vacation week. So, well, actually, not next week. Next Friday is vacation. So, looking forward to that. Cool. So let's give it a go. So I have I'm actually running this entire thing off a lab I found. So it's not gonna be me inventing any of this. So it's gonna be me basically just having a look at how this should be done and trying to implement it, hopefully not failing. Actually, I'm going home to Serbia, my original homeland. So I'm actually going on vacation after all the time back home to see my family. So with all the coronavirus stuff happening, I haven't been able to I get to do that. Okay, so we are gonna, yeah, we're good to fly. We actually have a flight from Berlin, which is great. We didn't have any flights there for like go, but I think they've reintroduced flights, so it's gonna be my first time flying in, well, since March, since early March. So. It's been a while. I miss airports. So okay, let's open up this. So how does this work? In essence, we store our configuration somewhere, and currently the way it can the way it supports configuration locations, I believe it's only on S3. So you keep a configuration, and configuration in essence would be anything. I'm gonna use JSON files because JSON files are easy to parse and easy to use as configuration files. So I'm gonna store a JSON file here that contains some configuration for my serverless application. So I'm gonna make a serverless application, a simple Lambda function, 2%. And I'm gonna use the configuration stored in an S3 bucket, and then I'm gonna basically use that configuration in my application and deploy the changes to that. So I've created a bucket. Nothing special about this bucket. The only special thing about this thing is its version control. So you need to enable versioning on the bucket. If you go to properties, you need to just enable versioning for the entire bucket. So simple as that. Okay, so let's create a configuration file. I have a configuration file I'm going to copy paste here. So, okay. Opening my terminal, let's create a file. Actually, there is a configuration file here. I already created it, so this is the one. So I'm going to do this. So I have a configuration file here that doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but it will make more sense once I start doing the application, once I show you the application. So there's two configuration items on a configuration file. There's a boolean, enable limit results, and then the value of that limit results. Now, what this will do, I have an application that spits out some information, some results, right? And I wanna set that limit, or set the limit of how much results it should show. Now, one of the best practices when dealing with application configuration is to have a boolean next to a configuration value. What in essence means, besides just introducing a configuration value such as a number of results you wish to return back, also introduce a configuration value or a configuration item that will say, is that configuration enabled or disabled? This makes it easy to switch off that configuration no matter what you do. So in this case, the default will be that this configuration is disabled and the result limit is 0. The result limit is 0 doesn't really matter, because if it's false, nothing will get applied. So this is very important if you do things like this. Create, booleans save lives, absolutely. So create a boolean like this to kind of limit any potential problems you may have, right? So I will leave it as such. Excellent. So I have this file, and I'm going to upload this file off to S3. So upload, add files. Let's see here. Add this file. Click upload, and I should be good, right? So once this is done, I actually need to start working with AppConfig now. So let me move on to AppConfig. Going here and just, well, AppConfig, right? AppConfig. Actually, AppConfig sits in the Systems Manager dashboard. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Hey, Dennis. Hello, hello, hi, welcome to the stream. Haven't been here a while. You were silent for the last. Okay, so create configuration data. So this is something I'm going to do here. I'm going to create a application called. I'm going to use just the names I have on the lab, so I just don't screw things up, because there's a bunch of naming things I need to follow as well. So I will call this AppConfig Lab. So this is an application I create that I'm going to manage my configurations for. Now, I'm not creating an application per se here. The application is separate, but concept of an application is within AppConfig. So like so. Now, the next thing I need to do is create an environment. So after creating this, I need to create an environment. Now, what an environment is basically, it can be anything. It can be something like a development, staging, prod, mobile, backend, doesn't matter. It's kind of a tag for a specific type of environment where you wish to push configuration changes to. So this is going to be a development environment. I'm just going to ignore everything else, create environment. Good. So we see here that we have an environment created. Excellent. Well, let's go back to the lab, and here, what are we going to do next? So we're going to go to configuration profiles. So these profiles are basically the way we do things, the way we actually, well, the things we actually deploy. It's a reference to the configuration data you will be using on your application. The critical configuration profile I'll use here. This one. So, and next. And I'm going to choose S3 as an object. So these are the configuration sources currently supported by AppConfig. So AppConfig supports an object in S3. It supports a systems manager document, or it even supports a parameter in systems manager parameter store. So you can choose either or. Now, simplest way is definitely to use an S3 object, because you can just pass it on a JSON file and just do whatever you want with that JSON file. If you do parameter store, it's a bit different, and well, a document is much more different. So S3 object, that S3 bucket, S3. So going here to okay. Just gonna select path. Back here, go here, and go back. Cool. So I've added this document now. Cool. Now I'm going to ignore the validators. Well, actually, I'm going to remove the validators because we're going to be doing the validators later on. I just want to show you how this exists. So it's going to create a new service role. It's called AppConfig Server Role. That may take a while. No, this may fail because I have done this before, so it may have created the same one. Cool. And you can see that it knows which versions of the object we have. So I've already done this 2 times, so it sees all the previous versions of said object. Cool. Moving along, and let's actually go and start deployment. So we're gonna make a really quick deployment. There's nothing to deploy to. I want to just show you how it works. And we're gonna be using a very short deployment just for the purposes of this lab. You should not do this in. So I'm gonna choose this environment, the latest object name. Now the deployment strategy. So let's actually create deployment strategy. Deployment strategy is basically how do you wish to deploy this object. If I do, let me here. Go. I want to deploy at 20% at a time linearly, right? So I want to make sure that I deploy only to 20% of my applications or my at a time. I will do, the duration should be 1 minute, and the bake time, basically the bake time is this amount of time AppConfig will wait after the deployment of your code or configuration, because during this bake time something may go wrong. You may trigger an alarm, something may just go haywire, and with that you can actually, within the bake time, you can roll back your changes if something is broken. So this is really good. You should always leave a bake time sufficiently long enough for you to be able to return. So I'm gonna just do that. Now I'm not gonna click create because I already have this one created, but basically this is how I'm doing it. Cancel. So Graham asks, sorry, is AppConfig managing applications on something like EC2 example? Yes. So well, it can do EC2 absolutely. It can do containers. It can do Lambda functions. It can do whatever, because it's a very interesting way of doing it. Think of it as an endpoint with configuration parameters, and the way you change those configuration parameters is managed, right? So I don't actually deploy anything to an EC2. I don't deploy anything to a Lambda function. I actually just make a change to that configuration parameter somewhere in the beauty of the cloud, and the application itself can pick up that change as it runs, and you'll see that as we go along. So now if that means that I can do a deployment here. So if I do this and just click start deployment, it will deploy this change to my configuration endpoint, and any application that invokes this right now will get this latest change once it's so. And again, it will make more sense once we get to the application. So is this a change to the application or the environment the application is in? So this is a change to the application itself, in a sense that the application queries this parameter, right? So it doesn't really matter. So if your application is running on an EC2 instance, doesn't really matter what it is. If it has a parameter, for example, the parameter I've created here is how much results should it return, right? The application will query a specific AppConfig parameter environment, and based off what it queries, it will return that. So, and this is just a really nice and managed way to deploy those changes to your configuration parameter store. It's an interesting concept. It's not actually deploying things to your application, but again, you'll see once we get into this. So we have seen that it's currently in the baking state, right? So it's now waiting for it to be successful. It will always be successful because there is no validation, there's no alarms, there's no monitoring here set up. So this should all be good. But let's actually move on to something else. So let's actually create this application. So now I want to create an actual application. So I'm going to, and I'm going to do a serverless application. So function. I'm just going to do a blank function. I have my code here, so I'm going to author from scratch. I'm going to do that. So permissions, I'm going to just use the basic execution role. So this is going to just create a new Lambda basic function role like that. And now I want to copy my code. Code here. Preparing your new music playlist. I'm not. I'm actually. This is the same music as last time. Is it audible? Can we see? Can you hear music? Okay. Because I don't see it here jiggling in the whole. What is it? Not loud. Yeah, it shouldn't be loud. I think last time I had a complaint that it was a bit too loud for people. So I want to make sure that it's not overwhelming. Okay, and is my voice loud enough? Because I had to cut it down a bit. The last stream was a bit too loud. Okay. My application, right? Let's just replace this code with this code. Now, if you see, a little higher would be better. Oh, okay. All right, let's do that. Let's. I think this is better now. I did it on the little mixer thing here. I think, is this okay now? Is it better or is it too loud? I don't want to keep peeking because I know. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Graham, for the support. Cool. So I have an application here. Now it's a super simple application that gets services. So it just spits out service names. So these are AppConfig, SageMaker Studio, Kendra, Code Guru, Fraud Detector, EKS and AWS Fargate, Outposts, Wavelength, Trans Gateway, and Amazon Detective. What is in common about these services? Well, they were all launched during reInvent. So so it doesn't do anything special. So it just literally spits out this JSON, nothing else. So what I want to do with this application is I want to control how much of these things it turns out, right? So let me just save this like so. And let's see what I have to do. Cool. So I have this application now. Well, I have this Lambda function. I want to create an API gateway. So Graham asks, is Node better than Python and Lambda? So I would not know. No, I think it's more to the point of what's your preference. But I think from the performance perspective, I really don't know if there is a difference between Python and Lambda on Python and Node.js on Lambda. So it really is. I don't think any of them would be. Why I use Node more? I use Node more because more of the examples I have, or more of the things I pick up, are written in Node. So I am by no means a Node developer. I am by no means even a Python developer. I can dabble in them, but it's not something I excel at. So Node is just something I pick up, and it doesn't really matter. It could be anything here that I use. So let's create an API gateway. So I'm going to create a REST API gateway here, and I'm just going to create new API. Let me give it a proper name. I'm going to be using this API name like so. I'm going to keep it as regional API. Cool. So let's create a new method to this thing. I'm going to use a get method, and I am gonna do a Lambda function invocation. So I'm gonna invoke a Lambda function. Then what is my Lambda function name? It's this. Yes, it's that. I'm gonna paste the Lambda function here. So what's gonna happen here is that once I invoke my endpoint, it's gonna trigger this Lambda function. Super simple, nothing else. Cool. If I do a test now, hopefully this works. Yes. So this is the output of my Lambda function. So it returns all of these lovely service names. Simple as that. So the goal behind my AppConfig integration today is that I want to control how much of these things does it return, right? So I could do that directly in code. I could go and change here and say, return only an X amount of those. But let's be more smart about it. Let's treat it as a configuration parameter, and let's use AppConfig to deploy that configuration parameter. Cool. So let's move on. So we go back to AppConfig now. So actually, let's have a look at our file. So I mentioned this before. The reason we do this in these two, by adding a bool and an actual value, just to be more safe. So now we need to add some permissions to my Lambda functions, because my Lambda function right now, it can only execute and it can only write logs to CloudWatch. So I want to give it a bit more permission. So if I go to IAM, I want to give it permissions to invoke AppConfig, because this is the thing. My Lambda function will need to invoke, or it will need to talk with AppConfig. So let's go to permissions, right? No, actually, no, I want to go to the Lambda function, right? Go to permissions here, and I want to click this Lambda role name. So here I'm just gonna do something. I'm gonna paste something here. If I go to policies, I'm gonna edit this policy. I'm gonna add something here. So if I go here, that, paste this in. I just want to do my account number this side. Bam, excellent. So now I'm basically allowing my Lambda function to run this API call, which is AppConfig get configuration on any resource, right? On any AppConfig resource. Save changes. That's all good. Cool. Now, this is where the integration comes. The integration comes in actually in my Lambda function. So I need to modify my Lambda function that it actually invokes AppConfig. So I have this Lambda function prepared already here. So if I do this and just go here and replace, it's almost the same. The only difference here is we have, well, we're actually using the SDK now, because we're going to be using the AWS SDK to talk to AppConfig to get this configuration. We're also defining some parameters. So this is where you actually define what's your AppConfig application, what is your client ID, what is your configuration you want to use, and what environment do you wish to pull configurations from. And then basically what we do here is make calls to AppConfig to get configuration and store that configuration in config data. Then these results are basically, well, no, not these results. This is a functional one. But the response is actually config data. Now, if I would save this, and go to API Gateway and hit test again. Now I will not get my common my services here, but I'm actually going to get configuration information back. See, the new response is actually zoom in a bit. The new response is horrible when you zoom in. Okay. So we have the two parameters: bool enable limit false and int result limit is 0. So these configuration parameters were available on AppConfig, and our serverless application, a Lambda function, was able to get those things by running these two commands, well, thanks to the AWS SDK. Now, what you need to do right now is basically, based off those configurations, you introduce logic into your Lambda function to do something with those configurations, right? So, but actually, let's see if this change propagates, right? So, if I how are we gonna do this? So, actually, let's modify our Lambda function to get these things properly out. So I have a piece of code here, which is actually in this lab. This piece of code is broken. So if a person who has written this lab is listening to me, fix it please, because this thing doesn't exist. So we need to create this let parse config data, and the parse config data is basically just this. Equal JSON such. Oh, so now what did I do here? No. So what did I do here? This piece of code right now basically gets the config data, parses the config data from that from AppConfig, and then if the parse config data bool enable limit results, right? So this is true, and we have a value on parse config data int result limit, then basically the result is going to be result splice. It's going to run the JavaScript splice here and reduce the amount that, well, basically trim the list to a number of results we have stated in this int result limit. So yeah, so this should work now. So if I save this and I change this to resolve, so yeah, do I need a comma? Do I need a trailing comma? I don't know. There's a discussion on trailing commas. So if I would go to API Gateway and cross my fingers that this works, if I run the test command, yeah, so I get still all of my services because I do get a response, I do get my configuration back, but because it's false, it's not true, it's 0, it does not apply anything here. So let's actually go ahead and make these changes to my code. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna change these things here to true, and I'm gonna set this number to 5. Save this file, open up that, but what's this? What did I do? Come on. Yes, that, please, thank you. Back here, and click upload, files. I'm using the same file now. I have just updated the contents of it, and just click upload. Okay, so now let's go back to AppConfig. Go here and go to AppConfig Lab. Select this development and let's hit kick off start deployment. So let's change. So even though I've changed the S3 file now, if I click this, I should still get all the files. So doesn't matter. So those files are still sorry. The configuration is still the old configuration. So now once I trigger the start deployment here on system, there we go. I'm gonna just do this one. I'm gonna use the latest object version. I'm gonna use this deployment strategy and call it please work, just to favor the gods. Start deployment, and yeah, so now it's gonna deploy this. It's gonna take a couple of minutes for this to work, and once this has been deployed, we're gonna be able to basically request those parameters through my application, or request those configuration changes through my application. While this is happening, I just want to check out something other end. Grim, I have an answer for you coming from one of the viewers from YouTube. He said that for your question, what is better, Lambda or Python? Sorry, Node.js or Python? He says it really depends what you want to do. So there you go. So to answer your question, Graham, where is it deploying to? It's deploying to AppConfig. Right? So it's deploying to AppConfig, and now my application will request this configuration parameter through API. So now that it has been deployed, basically these commands are requesting configuration data from AppConfig, and it's going to be available through this application. So if I would execute this thing right now, test, hopefully, yes, you see that we have 5 items right now because we have limited our application for only running from only displaying 5 items, and we made that configuration change by changing this file, right? Setting this and deploying it. So deploy is a weird word because you're not actually putting anything anywhere on your application. You're just making it available, and you're making this this change available right now. So give me just a second. I'm just saying thank you to the person who has responded to your question. Right. Where does AppConfig store this? I believe it stores somewhere internally, right? It's sitting in within its own configuration set. I think it's not just, or it actually keeps it. I believe it keeps it on S3 still, but it only invokes a specific version of that S3 object, so it doesn't go away from your account. So it's still sitting there. You use AppConfig as a proxy to invoke configuration changes from your S3 bucket. That's my understanding, at least. I don't think it would be moving it away from your account and storing it in somewhere else. So it should be sitting within your account. So that's great. So we have made this work right now. So pretty cool. But let's actually have a look at some other things. So this is a very simple way, or a simple way to start using this is just to have a simple application configuration like this, and it works. But we can do more. We can do some, for example, we can do some validation on our applications, on our application configuration. So if I go back to my application configuration here, and I go to configuration profiles, and click here, and click update configuration profile, I can add a validator. So if I click add validator, it will be able to basically add something. It can be either a JSON schema or a Lambda function to validate, is my configuration good? So it will actually check, is the configuration I'm passing a valid thing? Now, let me give you an example what a validator looks for JSON. So this is if I click the JSON schema and paste this in, you will see that this is a super simple JSON schema of what kind of things that it expects, right? So it expects that the property of my bool enable limits is type string, and the int result limit is type number. And it also requires two properties, and these are the two properties that are required. If these things are not fulfilled, or if these things are not actually not respected, the validation will fail. So it will prevent you from actually deploying these changes to your application, right? Or to your AppConfig store. So if I click update configuration profile like this, and if I go and attempt to start a deployment, I'm just going to select this. I'm going to select deployment. So it doesn't matter, this one. If I click start deployment, well, bam, it has failed. Why has this thing failed? So looking at this error, we have a bad request. The bad request says instance type boolean doesn't match allowed primitive type allowed string, right? So bool enable remit results is actually a boolean, not a string. So my JSON validator was actually wrong. So let's go and fix my JSON validator. So update configuration profile. Oh, thank you, Mr. Gaelic God. Thank you for the subscription with Twitch Prime. So I'm gonna change bool this type string to actually a bool. So if I just do boolean, right? That's the proper way to do it in JavaScript, right? Yeah, boolean. There we go. So if I do this right now, update configuration profile. Oh, hey, hello, Bevan. Thank you. Some guy from LinkedIn. Yes. Yeah, I stream this on two platforms. So I'm streaming this on YouTube and on Twitch, so it doesn't really matter. The only chat that shows here up is Twitch chat because of some reason. Should that be type number and not int? So apparently JavaScript uses number as the type for int. I believe so. So as I said, not a JavaScript guy here too much. So, but yes, that should work. So if I go, yes, there you go. So now if I go and start deployment, if I go like that and click deployment strategy like so, and click start deployment, it will work because my JSON validator, JSON schema validation has passed. I have a number for my limit, and I have a boolean for my bool, right? So, and it works. Now, so this is basically a JSON schema validation. So this is nothing specific. This is nothing AWS proprietary. This is just JSON schema validation. So I believe it supports 4.x as of now. So that version of schema validation. Now, another type of validation you can actually use, you can use Lambda validation to get a greater level of flexibility. So to get more features, more options to do some validations, you can also do it with a Lambda function. So let's actually do that. I'm going to create a validation Lambda function right now, and we're going to be using that thing to to validate our configuration. So if I go here and back to Lambda, I'm going to create a new Lambda function like so. I'm going to give it a name. It's going to be AppConfig Lambda validator. Permissions is going to leave the same. Click create function. So I'm going to I need to invoke a command line call to give some permission to my Lambda function. So let me open up this. This is created. It has been created. Cool. Let's go open up. Let's actually open up this. I'm just going to run this command. Now this command is basically going to give specific permissions for the AppConfig service principal. So it's going to give AppConfig permission to invoke this Lambda function. Nothing else. So if I just do this, jolly good. So now my Lambda function should have the ability. Well, sorry. Now my AppConfig principal should have the permission to invoke my Lambda function. So, and if I go actually here to permissions and refresh, we will see that we have a resource-based policy that says, hey, AppConfig service principal can invoke this Lambda function. I need that because I want to give permission to AppConfig to actually trigger this Lambda function as part of its validation. So I have some code here that is going to do some validation. Let me just paste it in. So what this thing is going to receive basically your code, and then based off that code, your configuration code, and it's gonna validate it. So it will do something to validate it. What is that validation gonna be? It really depends. In our use cases, it's gonna if int result is not a string, it's gonna throw an error. So this is intentional, so because I want to show you an error. So it takes your value. It's basically doing the same thing as the JSON schema, right? But it can do much more. You can ensure that certain parameters are of certain like range or certain type or whatever you can. You can invoke different services to request, are these things correct? You know, the serverless C is your oyster, right? So it doesn't really matter. So I'm just gonna save this right now. And I'm actually gonna go back to this one. Yes. So going back to AppConfig Lab, configuration profiles, and this one, update configuration profile, and I'm gonna add a new validator. So we can have multiple validators. So here I'm gonna select AWS Lambda function. I'm gonna find AppConfig validator. So here it is. I'm gonna leave the function version as blank, so I don't want to touch it because I want to make it easy to change. So back. Now, if I would start my deployment, if I would do the same thing, so deployment strategy, that, that, it will fail. Now I have a different type of failure. So it says unhandled payload. So we get a error from our Lambda function, int result limit configured as type number expecting type string, which is not, right? So it's not a problem with my configuration, it's a problem with my validation. So I need to go here and change this to type number. Save. Go back here and again attempt to start deployment, and successful. So what we've seen here is two types of validations, or two types of validations. One of them was JSON schema validation, which just uses the generic JSON schema validation. Well, what would you call it? It's not a tool, it's a utility, whatever. It uses just generic JSON schema validation. The second one is validation through a Lambda function, which in essence did the same thing, right? But it can do much more, right? With this thing, you can do whatever you want with your configuration files here. Right? So I'm just gonna let this go through. Now, one of the things I want to do as well is I think we can also have a look at is setting up a CloudWatch alarm, right? So let's actually create an API Gateway endpoint. So I'm gonna do one of the other things you can do on AppConfig is you can actually monitor a specific CloudWatch alarm. So let's say I deploy a change, and this change breaks my application. It just dies, and I can have an alarm basically listening or monitoring my alarm being triggered if my application no longer works, and if that alarm is triggered in a specific period, AppConfig will roll back configuration automatically. Right? So let's do that. I'm gonna create I want to try to simulate some problems here. So API Gateway, I want to go. I need to find a number thing here. I need this. So what I'm going to do here right now is I'm going to call another CLI command, AWS API Gateway. This is it, and I'm going to go change this CW and copy and then insert. So this is going to create a deployment called development. It's going to create a stage called development. This is something we're going to be using as our alarm. We're going to be monitoring this as well. We're going to be monitoring this through CloudWatch so we can create an alarm if something goes wrong. So, now we need to do IAM stuff. Fun. Now we need to give this thing some permissions because, of course. So let's create a policy. We need to create a policy that basically allows AppConfig to describe alarms. Right? So allows AppConfig to look at alarms. I'm just going to do this like that and just paste this. So basically, it allows the role that has this policy to describe alarms. So I'm just gonna do that. Name, create policy. Now I need to create a role. Now the role, I'm gonna create a new role that's gonna take that policy. I'm just gonna use EC2 here because I'm gonna change this after the fact. Permissions, I'm just gonna find this one that I've created before, like so. Tags, nope, review, nope. Give it a name, and it's gonna be this one. Create role. Cool. Now I need to just change this trust relationship. Change it from EC2 to AppConfig. So trust relationship, I'm just gonna edit, and I'm gonna just do AppConfig. So it allows AppConfig to basically describe CloudWatch alarms. Okay, now let's go to CloudWatch. And let's go create an alarm. So going here and create an alarm, I will select the metric. I'm going to use API Gateway as our metric. I'm going to use API name, and we have this API, AppConfig Lab API. It's the one we created, and I'm actually going to use this metric here, the 5xx error. So if I go here, I'll do the 5xx. That's not. Oh, that was from before. Sorry, that was from when I was playing around with it. But it's the same thing. So I want to just make this uses a sum. And I'm going to use, the period should be 5 minutes. That's okay. Cool. So if it's larger than 4, so if we have more than 5xx errors here on my API gateway, I want to make sure to trigger that there's something wrong. So let's have a look here. Fine, click next. I'm gonna remove all actions because I don't want to notify anybody. I want to create an alarm that's gonna go red if this is bad. So just give it a name. I'm gonna use this name here, just like so, and click create alarm. Cool. So it has insufficient data as of now, so that should be fine. Now let's go back to our Lambda function. So in our Lambda function here, this is our the actual Lambda function that provides us the endpoint, right? The services. So I want to just do something here. I want to add API endpoint here like that. Let's do that. Actually, I'm going to be receiving API errors anyway now. So, because if I would be going here to my API gateway and then to deployments, right? So this should not work now. I should be getting 5xx errors. So stages, if I click development, that, I should get an internal server error. No, it works. How do I break this? Now it's interesting. So if I refresh this now, yeah, you see that we have an API gateway here. So if I remove this, I just click delete, like so, and save. Now we will be getting 5x. We will be getting internal server errors, which are 500 errors. Now we have broken our application even before deployment. But it's just a simulation. This doesn't. You don't do this for actual production. Let's go back to AppConfig and actually create our monitoring. Monitoring part of this one. So it's update environment, update, click here, environment. This is where I set up monitors. So I want to specify that app role I've created. AppConfig CloudWatch role. This is the one, and I want to select an alarm. This one. So I'm using that alarm I've created before, and now what it's going to do, it's going to actually monitor this alarm during deployment. So if I click start deployment, like this, and just do a normal deployment strategy, that. Click start deployment. It's gonna go ahead and start deploying, but if I keep on generating 500 errors, right? So if I keep on like refreshing and getting 500 errors here, my alarm will slowly, hopefully, be in the red, right? So it's currently in insufficient data, so we might have to repeat this thing. So like so, like so, like so, like so. It takes a sum over 5 minutes, so it takes a moment for this to kind of generate. It's still in insufficient data because it doesn't have enough information to make a determination. Has something gone wrong? I'm gonna keep doing this. Hopefully yeah, okay, so cool, excellent. So we can see it here. So it actually has detected a CloudWatch alarm being triggered, and it has rolled back. So in a real world scenario, if your application would break because of an application change, now this is why you have longer baking times, and this baking time will actually well, it will wait until all the alarms are okay. Or sorry, it should be long enough to take into account your alarms, right? So if you have an alarm that will trigger within 5 minutes, your baking time should be at least 5 minutes, so that it should be at least more than 5 minutes, just in case. So so you are for sure to catch that alarm if it actually goes off. So we can see that it has rolled back, nothing has happened. That's a really neat way to go with this and make sure you have a safe deployment of configuration parameters. Okay, so I think that's it, right? There's a few other things you can do with this, but these are kind of the main things you can kind of work with when it comes to AppConfig. So what is AppConfig? To kind of circle this all into one little bow. AppConfig is a service that provides managed configuration updates to your applications. It does not push these applications, these configuration parameters or configuration items to your applications, but it makes them available to your applications, and your application in itself is the thing that actually grabs those configuration changes like you see here. So you just have a managed way to make those things available in a scalable and managed in a safe way, because you have things such as rollbacks if something goes wrong. You have validators, both JSON validators, you can just verify in the JSON schema, and Lambda validators. You have all of these guardrails that prevent you from screwing things up, right? So it's a really neat feature, and you can manage those things. You can have different versions, different environments of your configuration parameters, and it actually is a really fast and safe way to deploy feature toggles, application configuration changes to your end applications. And you can do this anywhere, right? So it's not limited to EC2, it's not limited to Lambda, it's not even limited to containers. You can do this from anywhere. Anywhere you can make an API call. Anywhere you can make an API call to AWS, you can do it. You can do it from on-prem, you can do it from your laptop if you want, right? So it doesn't really matter. Thank you, Graham. Yeah, actually, today was my first experience with AppConfig as well. So I've never used it before, but it's a lovely service, right? So I think it's a service that's not talked enough about. So this is the reason I wanted to do this stream today. And I think more and more people should adopt the concept of implementing application configuration to their applications, not just burning them into their source code. So yeah, thank you very much. I hope you really enjoyed this session on AppConfig. It was really fun for me to prepare and do. I thank you for all the people who I've actually spoken to the folks from AppConfig for this session, so they helped me a lot to kind of understand this. And yeah, I really hope you enjoyed it. This video is going to be available on YouTube, on Twitch, whatever, right? And if you have missed most of it, so yeah, thank you very much. Have a lovely weekend, and well, I will see you next Tuesday for one more stream before my vacation. So have a lovely weekend. Bye bye.